Okay, with that, I would like to call to order our City of Port Orchard Finance Committee meeting of January 18th to order. And the first thing we have on the agenda is Noah, you're going to give us an update on sales tax.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll turn our attention to sales tax. We've finally closed out December. So this is the full look at 2021 and how we performed. And it's been great all year long. And as you can see here, our actuals are 18% year-over-year growth over 2020. When we look at our budget, we're about 1% over what we budgeted. Again, recall that we adjusted the budget part of the mid-year review, so that's why that's a tighter spread there. But the actual growth is what's really important for the city and what's going on there. Again, now we are at about 56% of our biennial budget, so we're already making progress into the second half of the year.
Good.
When we scroll down to our real estate excise tax, again, good news, 89% growth year over year. When we look at the full 2021 compared to 2020, when we compare it to our budget, we're roughly 32% higher than our budget for 2021. And we're well on our way for our biennial budget, roughly about 91% of our biennial total. So looking all positive from that perspective as well. Any questions or comments?
Very good.
That's very good.
Since it is year end, we do have our 13th month. So as we've been communicating, we won't close the books until after January 20th. So we're continuing to book expenses to 2021 for services and goods that were ordered, received in that calendar year. So hopefully next month's Finance Committee meeting, we'll have an update on fund balances, as well as revenue and expense reports and the regular monthly report. But we're just in the process of booking expenses and closing out the calendar year. So next month we'll have that information for the council.
Makes sense.
Good deal.
So with that, the next topic we have is Director Bond, who's here to talk about a few different topics.
Yeah, good evening. The first item that I asked Noah to put on the agenda today was building inspection and plan review issues that we're having in DCD. We have been seeing our review time slipping and our responsiveness for inspections being a little bit less than what has been expressed is kind of our level of service for the city. Historically, council has pushed us to have an 8-week turnaround for single family building permit reviews, and we've provided next day building inspections if those inspections are requested by 3 p.m. the day prior. We are so busy in our department right now that we are having trouble keeping up with those timelines. Currently, we're averaging 12 weeks for a single family plan review and obviously significantly longer for multifamily or commercial projects where the review is much more complex. But given the amount of permits that we've issued, combined with the amount of permits in the pipeline, we are seeing this start to slip further and further, and we're getting a little bit behind. Some of the reason that this is getting behind is not solely related to building permit staff. There's also bottlenecks in public works and planning in terms of reviewing the land use regulations and the public works standards as they relate to building permits. But regardless, we're pretty bogged down. In addition, as we closed out 2021, I tallied up all of our invoices for the year, and remember that we didn't hire a building official until July was their start date. So for the first half of the year, we didn't have an FTE and we were relying on a consultant, but we spent about $250,000 in total in 2021 on building consultant services. When the mid-year budget review request came out, we put in a request to increase our total spending on building consultants in 2022 to $75,000 because we thought that the building official with our inspector and $75,000 from a consultant would be enough to cover our services. But based on what I'm seeing just for November, December, and into January, we are relying on our consultants much more than expected for a couple of reasons. One of them is that the fire ILA shifted fire plan reviews and fire inspections over to the city. Angela, our building official, is qualified to do fire inspections. The problem is that she's also our only plan reviewer, and it's do we let plan review slip or do we do fire inspections? And so currently we are using our consultant inspector to do those fire inspections because of her workload. The other issue that we have is that our primary inspector, who's in the field, 5 days a week, is comfortable doing single family residential inspections, but we have so many multifamily projects under construction that also requires complex and lengthy inspections that are beyond that person's ability. And so that either, again, falls to the building official to go out in the field and do the inspection, which then puts plan reviews, which we are backed up on hold. So I provided some data in the memo that was sent to you, just letting you know what our neighboring jurisdictions are doing for plan review. And we're on the longer end of things, but not out of range. We're about the same as Bremerton on plan review. Our inspection responsiveness is actually better, or at least it tries to be better than our neighbors. And so really the question I think the city council has is, do we want to let our inspection responsiveness slip a little bit and our plan review responsiveness slip a little bit, or do we want to increase our use of consultants? And based on the rates, based on our expenditures right now, I think it's going to take at least $150,000 next year, which is $75,000 more than we've budgeted to maintain our current levels and even potentially get caught up a little bit. It could end up being more than that if everything that we're being told is going to come in for permits actually comes in. But I think at a minimum, we need to look at adjusting the budget to maintain these levels. And so we wanted to let the finance committee discuss kind of what the expectations are here.
So Sean, if I may, what Nick and I have talked about is trying to not let the plan reviews get much farther out and rely on our consultants a little bit there, but maybe add a day to the inspection expectation, that it's 48 hours instead, or 20, it would happen within 2 days versus next day on an inspection. But so go ahead with your question.
Yeah, no, and I don't have a problem with going from 24 to 48 hours. That's still an incredible response time. My question, I think, is more on, the costs associated with consultants versus the efficiencies that perhaps, Nick, you have when you have someone in-house, right? So let's look at 2022. You're anticipating your memo anywhere between $150,000 and $240,000 in consultants, if I read that right?
Right.
And I would think dealing with consultants that it may be a little less efficient. And so if we were to bring on another FTE, and I could be totally wrong, this is why I'm asking the question. If we were to bring on another FTE, right, and call it, whatever that number is, what would that look like, right? Because to me, I'd rather have it in-house than to rely on consultants. I think there's plenty of work to be done, and if things shift a little bit, I don't know. I just think it's more efficient to do it indoors, or in-house. But I'd love to hear your feedback. That was one option you didn't add to your memo.
Yeah, well, that was an option. That was option 3 in my memo. And I think the challenge right now is, given the labor market, it's incredibly hard to find qualified people. And so we may end up with somebody who's a little bit green and trying to train them to do this work in the city, which is not going to save our building official any time versus managing a consultant. The other thing is that interest rates are going up, and it seems like housing demand is remaining strong and is likely to remain strong, but we don't know for how long. And so I'm not sure that I'm confident that we need 3 FTEs permanently. We might need them on a short-term basis. And then the question is, can we actually get somebody, versus having, right now we have 2 consultants under contract, and they have more qualified inspectors and plan reviewers, certainly. And also that fire inspection piece is something that most building inspectors don't do, is the fire alarms and fire sprinkler systems. One of our consultants who does inspections locally out of his team of 4 is qualified to do that work. So he's the only person we can call out to do that as a consultant. Otherwise, it has to be our in-house person. And I don't know that we're going to find just a kind of a low or mid-level inspector to do that type of work. But I don't know. I mean, McCormick Communities, when they've provided a timeline of their build out, and if the economy stays strong and they do what they're saying they're going to do, then maybe there is need for a third inspector. It's just hard to see how long this current wave is going to sustain
Right.
itself.
And my follow-on question is, you gave us an update mid-year. What was the total revenue you brought in from permit fees in 2021, right? Because that's the flip side of this. It's like we have the revenue to support these services. So what we did at the time.
It's a lot. I haven't seen the end of year numbers yet. I haven't looked at those. But I think it was certainly more than double what we budgeted.
Exactly. And so, you know, to be able to flex up our resources when the business volumes are there, to me makes perfect sense. But John, you may want to speak to that as well.
And
Well,
the only other thing
A little
before,
bit perspective on Sean.
John froze up. My concern is just, we would probably take more than 6 months to get this person up to speed,
Right.
because we're not
Not
going
a
to hire
problem.
somebody that's seasoned.
and it's space. We don't have a desk. We don't have a vehicle. There's a lot that goes with hiring an inspector who's out in the field.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of making you aware. We're going to lean on our inspectors probably a little harder than we want to keep from that 18 weeks getting into something longer. And then probably slip a little bit, you know, be in line with our neighbors other than Gig Harbor on the turns on the inspections. So John, you
Well,
started to say something, froze up.
Yeah, before I froze, I apologize. One of the things that I was going to say is that in reading Nick's memo, I was kind of impressed with the idea of bringing on yet a third consultant. And to me, that allows him to draw from the 3 different resources based on need, that he can keep up with the need fairly easily, and he can certainly turn down that spigot if things slow down. I also appreciate, Nick, what you just said in your memo about the labor market right now and trying to bring somebody in and get him trained up. So I personally think that the consultant route would be appropriate now, and then let's revisit it, you know, in 6 to 9 months. If the labor market changes and or the economy shifts in the demand, we can kind of flex easier.
Should we test the waters at all? Does it hurt for us to go out and see what's out there to see if there is someone with experience? Or
Well, we can't post a job until you guys.
I understand, but we could do something like we just did with the police department, right? We could authorize something that allows you to go at least get out ahead of this.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's going to solve the recruitment, training, and all of that before you have somebody on staff. And then what do you do when the economy slows down? You lay somebody off. That's, you know, the volatility right now of our economy.
Right. It's a double-edged sword. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, it seems to me like we're kind of behind the 8 ball right now. We don't have the time to train somebody up, although that would be the best alternative long-term, but short-term we're in a crunch. So I kind of tend to agree with John and looking at a third source for consultants, but is there a program that we can get into with these guys that we don't have to sign a year agreement or something with them? What's the time frame on those?
They're an on-call consultant, Mark.
Okay.
So we have it's open-ended. We use them and pay them as we need them. So it's not like we have a fixed expense. It's as long as the demand's there and we feed them the work, they get paid for the work that they're doing. It's just going to exceed, at the current pace, it's going to exceed what we've budgeted probably by $50,000 to $75,000. So we're just making the finance committee aware of that if that holds true, we're going to need to do a budget amendment for that expenditure. But on the other hand, as Sean's pointing out, we'll garner sufficient revenue to pay for it. It's not like we have to go find dollars.
Exactly.
And I did have an update on the third consultant. After I put together the memo, our building official met with the consultant that we had selected off the roster, and they currently don't have any inspectors that are available. So they're not taking new inspection clients, but they are taking plan review clients because they have people who can do the plan review, which then frees Angela up to go out into the field rather than sitting in the office reviewing plans. So I think it's still a good idea to bring them on. And if we brought them on, hopefully they'll gain that capacity. But right now they don't have the ability to cover Kitsap County.
I'm good with that, and I appreciate the memo and just keeping us up to speed. I mean, we certainly need to provide you with the resources to fulfill the demand that you're dealing with.
All right,
And
thank
it
you.
sounds like he's earning the resources based on the demand.
Mhm.
Right. Agreed.
Sorry, I turned my video off to see I'm having internet issues, and maybe I can reduce my bandwidth needs if I turn off video. So, all right. Anything else on that subject? All right. How about the traffic study? Nick is-
Yeah, so I'm Mark Dorsey and I met with the mayor in December and again after the first of the year, because when we're looking at all the development that's been permitted but these units haven't yet been occupied by residents, we are starting to have some concerns about some of our corridors that are already challenged in terms of transportation. And so even though we did concurrency review for each of these projects when they came in for permits, in some instances that was 2 or 3 years ago, and we really haven't taken a cumulative look at how Bethel's going to function, how Sedgwick by Lowe's is going to function once all of this stuff becomes occupied. And so we're starting to get to the point where, and I'm sure you all have noticed if you've tried to even drive anywhere at noon, there's a lot of congestion just trying to get up Bethel in the middle of the day, much less at rush hour. We're beginning to be a little bit concerned about our ability to respond to emergencies and other issues with some of the intersections that development didn't cause the intersection to fail. It was already failing, and we continue to pile more and more traffic on. So we have an on-call consultant, Transportation Solutions, Inc., and typically they're reviewing third-party reports and are doing things that are there's a corresponding revenue to offset our expenditures. In this case, we're proposing to use that on-call contract because we want them to take all of our pipeline development and look at a couple of key areas of the city where we're starting to have these concerns and give us a picture of how bad are these areas going to look. And so it's a $9,400 expenditure on our on-call consultant. And I think that this information may be needed to justify any number of things from moving forward with improvements or putting together ballot measures or other steps that the city may need to take in certain areas because of failing intersections.
Nick, if I may, really what I want to use this data to drive is we've got to unless we go to our voters and get a package approved for a taxing measure to fix Bethel all in one, we're going to be able to tackle an intersection, probably one intersection every 2 or 3 years, because we're competing for grants and we just have only so much bandwidth from a staffing standpoint. So I want to make sure that the targeted decisions that we make about which intersections to move forward with first are data driven, so that we're not improving the wrong intersection. Well, I want to maximize the return on the $4 or $5 million project that we're likely to do. And I would like to do that with data. And then I think I would like also, we reach out to this consultant to give us a scope and a fee proposal to help us analyze a ballot measure and a sales tax measure for the Bethel corridor to fix the whole corridor, to bond it. And then we would have a sales tax measure, and it would be paid for not just by our citizens, but everybody that shops, within the city of Port Orchard. But this is that first step. And if the citizens don't want to, tax themselves for this, at least we've, everybody needs to recognize then we're gonna go through this a systematic process, and it's probably going to be 10 or 12 years or more before we fix all of these intersections on Bethel. But I want to have data to support which intersections we do in what order.
So that's basically what I'm getting out of this, is what you're looking at is if we're in a phased improvement, you just need to make sure we're fixing the right intersections at the right time.
Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, I would love an updated report too, because it seems to me as I drive around that over the last 2 years, right, people's driving habits have changed drastically. It's changed where they're commuting to work, where they're at. I just think it's different. And so hopefully there's new metrics that these consultants are using to take a fresh look at this, because I think, maybe the way they measured it in the past, it's changed the last couple of years. It sure seems like it has.
Yeah, and I caution you, this is only looking at the Bethel corridor where we've got a number of multifamily projects. So we want to look at these nearly 1,000 units of multifamily are in the permitting process. If these all come to market, what impacts does it have to this existing road system? And are we prioritizing?
Take a look at today's traffic patterns on Bethel, an updated approach to see how that's changed. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I think there's a combination.
We're gonna take today's and then plug in the pipeline that we have. And if it all happens,
it's very different than it was 24 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
an
interesting thing, when you look back at our 2015, 2016 comprehensive plan update, we built the city's first model at that time. And between the development that has occurred and what's approved right now in the Bethel corridor, it's like 35% more vehicle trips on Bethel in 7 or 8 years time. Right. So it's a significant increase of throughput on a road that isn't designed for that level of traffic.
So I'm guessing that the reason that we're talking about this is that you need another $9,400 to add to consultants.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is a budgeted expenditure, I believe. Well, maybe Noah, is this one zeroed out for the revenue and the expenditure, or is there a set amount of expenditure and then the revenue just isn't going to come in for this task order?
I don't believe this needs to be approved, Nick, because your consultants, it's pass-through money. We don't have a budget authority for this. Is that correct, Noah?
Well, with the pass-throughs, generally, because we don't have a good dollar amount, both on the revenue and expense side, we haven't been budgeted them, but we clean up the actuals when we do kind of the mid-year review or late budget amendment to ensure we have total expenditure authority to support it. But because it's pass-through, it should net to zero impact to the city. So this is another pass-through contract, correct, Nick?
No,
it's not. It doesn't have a corresponding revenue, but it's under the same on-call contract.
Okay. Well, I think for 2022, we have budget authority total for the full year as we were just beginning the fiscal year. So I think it's not a large amount for this contract.
Yeah, it's $9,400.
Yeah, so $10,000, we can absorb that within the current budget and then look at this later mid fiscal year to see if a budget amendment is needed, but the contract would still need to be approved. And then I did want to mention, because I pulled back and looked at the revenues for planning and permitting, and Nick will like to hear this. We're about $250,000 over our budget for 2021. So when we talk about these big new contracts, a lot of that can be absorbed with the over revenue that we have received. So Good news there.
Yep.
Was that permits and plan review, or just the plan review, the plan check fee?
That's just the license permits. Yeah, I didn't include the other ones. I just grabbed the big number there.
Okay.
We have other positive balances, but that one stood out to me.
So Noah, this TSI is a task order under an existing contract that has already been approved. So do we take the task order for approval, or because we're already under contract with them for on-call services, can we just proceed with the task order?
Yeah, I think we can just proceed as long as everyone's supportive of the concept.
Okay.
I'm fine with it for my perspective, and I like the way that you're approaching this, that if we have to do a mid-year, we can deal with it then and not do it January 18th of this budget year.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, we'll move forward.
Mark, you have any input?
What's the length of time on this survey or this study?
Oh, this is probably 30 to 60 days worth of work.
Okay. And then they work it, and then they put it together to be reviewed, and then
they'll put together a technical memo.
Okay.
That we'll share with you guys. And I'm just wanting this to inform our as we approach future grants or prioritizing our design dollars so that when we pursue grants that we're putting the dollars to the right intersections.
Right, and the past study that we had was 2 years old, correct?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
No, it's
so-
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this will be great information
Yeah.
moving forward.
We only have so many dollars, and if we put peanut butter on the whole corridor, we may not be putting
Right.
the resources in the right place. And so I just want to make data driven decisions versus, Mark thinks that it's Salmonberry that needs to get improved, and Sean thinks it's Lund, and and I think it's Sedgwick. Let's have a consultant tell us where the traffic is and where we'll get the most benefit to improve an intersection and prioritize from there.
Which one is going to completely fail first?
Mhm.
All right.
If
Any
that
more
hasn't
on-
already.
Yeah, exactly. Any more on traffic study?
Nope.
So will this, one more question by me, does this include the Sedgwick Bethel intersection, or is Sedgwick part of the state program?
It's so they're going to calibrate the model and take all of our pipeline growth from the entire city and feed it in. We're really looking more closely at the problem areas that the city has, but we're generating the data and the model that will inform a lot of different things, and will also feed into our comp plan update in 2024. So it's useful beyond just looking at any particular intersection.
Right. All right, thanks, Nick.
Okay. School ILA. I read
All
through
right.
it and looks pretty straightforward. I just want to make sure that we're all going into this with our eyes open, because to some extent we're taking on additional responsibilities to do this.
We're already doing it. We just didn't have an agreement.
So we're already funneling
Yeah.
and collecting and processing, and we're
Mhm.
not charging anything for that service.
Correct. And really, we've been asking.
Nick froze. So we've
people
been
were
working
living in
on
the
this.
district for
Go
at
ahead,
least 5
Nick.
or 6 years, and they've had so much turnover, and we've had so many different city attorneys. We've gotten down the road, and then somebody leaves the district, and then our attorney changes, and we finally got this thing to the finish line. The real issue here is that currently we require developers to go pay their money to the district directly and bring us a receipt, and then we will issue their building permits. We're going to take the payment of the fees in-house, and then I believe it's quarterly, NOAA will be transferring money to the school district that they are responsible for holding. But the big change is now they're indemnifying us against appeals of the impact fee, and they're becoming accountable for all the risk that is associated with an impact fee program that the city has currently taken on itself, even though we don't have the data to back it up, and we're not the ones tracking and spending the money. So this really, I think it's a major benefit to the city, because it is reducing our risk significantly, even if it means that we're now receiving the money in and transferring it to the district, which is slightly more work. It's long overdue.
We
Oh.
started. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to ask Noah, do you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nick. And then, it's a slight collection on our part, and we're going to build this into our processes with the intent to remit the funds monthly to them. That way, we are not acting as their treasurer. We're simply the pass-through agent, or taking it from the developers and giving the school district their funds. That way they can invest it, earn the interest on it, and manage it. So I think that works well for us.
Yeah,
I just noted it from the standpoint of the additional work on your half of tracking and sending and all that sort of stuff. And I guess my peevishness with the state of Washington and charging us to collect our sales tax is coming through here. So if you're fine with it and everybody else is fine with it, I'm okay with it. I think reducing the risk is a good thing.
Yeah, we've been,
Yeah.
school impact fees have been around about 15 years now, and we've
Right.
never had a proper agreement. And this, like as Nick said, we start down this path, because we think it's on fire, and then a different fire erupts. And then we change city attorneys, or the finance director at the school district changed. So we've been touching this off and on for 6 years, and I'm just glad we finally got to the finish line.
No, I like the idea of reducing our risk and documenting what's going on. It's just that for 15 years, as Nick had suggested, we've always told developers, you go to the school district, you pay the money, you bring us a receipt, and then we move forward. Now we're going to collect from the developers directly and handle it and account for it and send them a check. That was the only thing that jumped out at me. Sean, you were going to say something?
No, I'm concerned with all those same things, John, you know, and I'm glad we're getting rid of that liability. But I think if we do look at it from the customer standpoint, the whole idea of a one-stop shop, I'm sure they're going to appreciate that. So there's a little positive consequence there as well. So long as we, are on the up and up with everything you just said, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate your consideration, Chairman Clausen, because it is a slightly more work on the finance admin side. But I think we can build it into our processes to hopefully not have a huge burden added.
Okay.
And our hope is that, so the school district has already approved this agreement. They passed it in December. We were intending to bring it to the city council for a vote on the 25th, unless the finance committee thinks it needs a stop at work study, but we're hoping that you can speak to this and say that you've reviewed it and that you're comfortable with it. But if that's not the case, we can certainly push it to work study in February and delay this a little bit.
It's an easy, quick read. I don't have a problem with bringing it to the 25th and just defending it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It certainly just clarifies who's doing what, and who's responsible, and who's indemnifying who.
I agree.
Sounds good.
All righty. Now we go on to Chief Brown, hiring incentives.
There. Yeah, so I appreciate you guys taking some time. I'll go over the first one. This was introduced at the last finance committee. I appreciate everybody understanding my naivete and not putting a recommendation down. So my recommendation, based on the last time that we met, is to get us at least in the middle of the rest of our regional partners for a lateral hiring incentive. So we are the last agency that is not providing a hiring incentive for qualified lateral peace officers that are coming from another agency. At a minimum, everybody else in the county is providing a $5,000 lateral incentive, $2,500 upon being hired, $2,500 upon making probation. My further recommendation is also to provide some time off, so vacation time and sick leave, just so that people that are leaving a career in another agency have a little bit of a buffer, especially since we're really, really trying hard right now to help maintain officers' mental wellness. Being able to take a break now and then, especially after they're new, is a net positive. So if anyone has any questions on that memo, I'm more than willing to answer.
Chief, what was the maximum bonus being offered from our regional?
$10,000. That's from Bremerton.
Yeah, I would recommend we go to that level. I think we should be at the top of it, and we want to recruit the best. I think the difference of $5,000 to be able to attract talent and retain talent, I think is well worth the investment. But that's just my views. I'd love to hear from both John and Mark on that.
I'm pretty good with that. I would not disagree with you, Sean, although it looks like that our benefit package is a little greater than Bremerton's at this point from what Matt's showing us here. But yeah, we do need to try to attract the best folks that we can. And if there's a $5,000 difference between us getting an absolute outstanding person and not, I think that's a waste of $5,000 for our city. So I would be in agreement with you there, Sean.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily a perpetual policy, right? I mean, this is something that's a tool to help us get where we've been trying to get for a few years. And I just want to try to provide Chief all the tools to be able to get his force up to where it needs to be. So if it's a $5,000 decision, I think it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, I know that the mayor and I have talked, and I've also worked with HR. This would be a temporary policy based upon need, so it doesn't go into perpetuity. Any thoughts on the same, trying to stay the same as Bremerton with leave?
Again, I would, I just think we're not talking about a lot of money. This is kind of a one-time incentive. And so if we're at the top of the list and we're the jurisdiction of choice, I would prefer to aim for that than just to try to aim for mediocrity.
What's the leave that Bremerton offers, Matt?
The leave currently is 40 hours of vacation and 40 hours of sick leave, which is also what we are proposing. They have longevity pay in there. That is not something I believe that we currently have in our contract, but we are paying them commensurate with their experience based on our sliding scale.
Well, before I froze up, or you guys froze up and I had to restart, I was commenting that I'm really on the fence. I think, Sean, you raised a good argument that this is not like we're hiring all of Kitsap County. We need a few good people to fill the vacant positions we have. So it's probably worth the additional investment to try to get folks and get our staff up to the level that we want it to be. So if we can do that with laterals, great.
Yeah, and another thing that I see is look at the amount of money we haven't been spending that's been budgeted because we have expected to have these people, right? So it's the expenditures, it's there. We're just kind of reallocating what we didn't spend in the past to try to bolster up this, in these times.
Yeah, good point.
And to be honest, if we immediately implemented this at the cost point that you were talking about, and we hired for all of our vacant positions, it would be $50,000.
I agree with Sean. Mark, do you have any comments?
So Chief, you mentioned in this memo or another document I was reading that you'll be losing 2 folks here the second half of 22. Senior folks?
This late spring, yes.
Okay, so sometime here in 22, and I would assume they're senior people.
They are.
So we'll be basically booking that loss of bonus and benefit that they've been achieving over the years. I mean, we're going to pay that out, but we're going to step back as far as that goes for your staff, correct?
That's correct, and that's why we're hoping to make sure that we're imminently attractive so that we can start filling gaps.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So I guess a question for Mayor, you or Debbie, how do we move this forward to the full council?
Well, I think the plan is we were going to bring this married with the ability that we talked about last month to surge the FTE count up so that we can account for these two retirements that we know are going to happen this year. So we'll have an FTE account that includes 2 more officers than we want to have, because it's going to take us, 18 months from start to finish once we identify somebody to get them working on the street. So could have an outcome that we have a tiny bit of overlap, but I bet we don't. And I bet we're going to be 2 more officers down before we know it. So we've got that to bring forward, and this incentive to bring forward, as well as the employee incentive of $250 that we talked about. So Debbie's got 3 things that she'll bring forward, hopefully at a first meeting in February.
That's fine. Go ahead.
I don't have a timeline without jumping out my 2nd story window, which the chief tells me isn't high enough at the moment.
Don't do that.
We do have to negotiate this with the union. Both concepts have to be negotiated. And if the bonus to current employees to refer a good candidate to us goes to all employees, which I understand to be the intent, then there's 5 MOUs that we need to sign for that one. No union is going to resist this. it should be an easy sell, but we do have to jump through those hoops. So that may take an extra bit of time, but best as I can juggling the balls, I'll juggle it fast.
Well, I guess with that in mind, I'm wondering if this wouldn't be a subject for the February work study, just to bring the rest of the council up to speed. And then have action at the last meeting in February. Is that reasonable?
That, for me, that is it should be a very doable timeline.
In light of working with all of the unions that you're gonna have to deal with, like you say, I don't think they're gonna say no, but
Right.
what about adding this little bit to your request type of thing? So. All right. Sean, you're okay with that?
No, absolutely. That's great.
Mark, you
Appreciate the
okay with-
support. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Chief.
All right, Chief, overtime.
Yeah, so this was more just to make the council aware of some of the struggles that we are experiencing and what we intend to do about it. So as we were discussing with the recent request, we are trying to make sure that our department is not only viable, but we're taking care of our officers so that they are not only highly functional, but they're safe and the community is safe. One of the things that we are looking to do as we experience some issues involving COVID, involving some FMLA, and of course, a loss of staff. I had been in communication with the superintendent about the SRO position. It is highly likely that we will be at their request and at our request, temporarily suspending that position so that we can move it back into patrol, so that we can cover hours without driving the rest of our team into the ground. That's about $10,000 from whenever we pull it through the end of May. It's about $10,000 a month. We are also working with the Guild, and we're working with Human Resources and exploring whether or not we should temporarily move to a 12-hour schedule. Our officers are already right now working between, depending on the month, between 600 and 700 hours of overtime just to cover the schedule, to make sure that we have our 2-officer minimum. That does not include overtime related to mandatory training, as has been required by new legislative updates, or you get to the end of the shift and you've got some paperwork that you have to get done, and so you need to stay over. This is strictly related to gaps in our schedule. And we're also looking at peak hour staffing adjustments, where we are examining our call volume and saying, we average 600 calls per year between the hours of 3 and 5. Maybe we need to start shifting some staffing towards the times of the day when we know we have a lot of calls, which is between 11 and 8 p.m. So we're doing some things, but I wanted to make the council aware that of just some of the struggles and some of the budgetary impacts, but that we are staying on top of them, and we'll keep you in the loop as best that we can.
So Chief, is this a shortfall that we're spending all this overtime on? Is that a result of the lack of staff?
It is, and that has to do with a variety of factors. Like I said, we are trying to make sure that we have 14 staff that we can field in our operations unit, or in our patrol unit at any one time. The impacts of COVID, especially right now, are making that a little bit difficult. We've had some retirements. We have hired for a number of our positions, but they're still in training. So trying to cover for that just results in shift coverage issues that we have.
So you've been experiencing the COVID pandemic in your department as well, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Everywhere.
Even vaccinated employees that are boosted, if they're symptomatic or non-symptomatic, but they test positive, or they're with a family member who has tested positive, that's a mandatory 5 days out of the office.
Even now with the new CDC direction on vaccinated and boosted individuals?
Yeah, it's 5 days instead of 10 because of that.
Yep.
You might want to check that, because I think it might be shorter.
And not if you don't have symptoms.
If
If you don't have symptoms and you're vaccinated and boosted, you don't have to do a 5-day quarantine.
Mhm.
Correct.
Correct. I think the chief's referring to symptomatic.
Oh, symptomatic, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our team is incredibly dedicated. We've certainly had some that have, not believed that they needed to stay home because they wanted to be here for our team, but we've had to send them home because of there are symptoms. Again, it's not just keeping staff safe. Our staff goes into people's homes. Our staff goes into the jail. The jail has had an outbreak, as many of you know, and that was a significant impact region-wide. So Monday of last week, I actually increased our safety protocols. So we have limited the number of staff in the building. We have gone to KN 95s to include those people who are working in offices by themselves. We are stretched enough that we need to be extra careful.
And so what the chief's speaking to monetarily is about $50,000 if we pull our SRO back so that we can have some more coverage. But as Sean pointed to earlier, we don't have all our positions filled. It's not that you're going to exceed our budget authority. It just is keeping you informed.
Okay.
Correct.
And Chief, may I add? I just, again, took a quick look at the 2021 results. And while this is, going to cost us some more in 2022 for overtime to make sure everyone's doing well, the chief did have significant savings in 2021. So we currently sitting on about $800,000 of savings against his budget. So again, we talked about this and I expressed that we feel very comfortable financially that we can afford to do this and it's the best interest of him and his officers.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there anything for the good of the order?
I've got a couple things. Noah put it down as affordable housing, but it's not that. I'm going to talk about that at the work study, but I've got a couple things. One, we talked about our ARPA money and that we were going to go get a design done for the inner tie on Old Clifton. And Noah and I thought that scope was about $300,000 or $400,000. And it turns out it's much more than just a water line. There's 2 lift stations that'll need to be located along Old Clifton. We don't know where they need to be. And so the scope was more the scope and budget that was brought from Public Works to Noah and I was north of $1 million, which caused us to pause because we've got 2.8 million, Noah, in ARPA dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And I didn't want to spend, so then we had a staff meeting and we talked about what makes me nervous is the Marina pump station. And it makes me even more nervous about what I learned today. So we had Mark go back to the consultant and say, okay, if we did a 30% design on this, what would the scope and the budget be on that? So we received that information this morning, and a lion's share of the, siting the lift stations and a lion's share of the work happens in the first 30% of the design. And so the scope on that was $460,000. And if we do this in a phased approach, we learned that by stopping and starting the consultant, it'll cost us about $100,000 more money. So what we also learned today is our designers for the Marina lift station, that the project is at $13 million and we've got a loan to cover that. We're at about 75% on the design, and they're down to, and it's north of $1 million on the design on that. And we're to 75%, and they're saying we're down to our last 35,000. We've spent the whole budget, and they're blaming us a little bit for 2 things. One, because of the master plan, we wanted the building to be aesthetically pleasing. So that should have been maybe $50,000 or $100,000 to, exterior treatments to the building. And the other, we got the sea level rise report. And we identified and we told them about 4 months ago, we need to raise this thing out of the ground another 1.5 feet to account for sea level rise. They're coming back to us and saying they need another $750,000 to finish this design. And we're going exactly what Sean's reaction was and some foul words. And Mark's on the verge of firing this consultant, but we want to make sure we're not going to make things worse, because we can't believe that this is going to cost that much more to finish this design. So that all said, we're going to need something more for this design. I'm not comfortable with the scope and budget we've got for the Intertie project. I got 3 choices: award the $1 million contract for the Intertie project, phase it like I talked to. I'm not feeling good about that either. Or pause this until this fall, once I have the Marina Pump Station designed and we have awarded a contract, I'll feel a heck of a lot better that we got enough money to pay for everything and not have any and not going to have any cost overruns. But I'd hate to spend $1 million of this 2.4 and wish I had it back 9 months from now.
I would have to agree with you, Rob. I think the most pressing issue that we have in front of us right now is the Marina Pump Station, not to mention we got a $13 million loan to do something with that we've got to get it to work.
Okay.
I agree as well. I'm sure you've already done this. Have you reverted back to the contract with that consultant to look for breach? I mean, that just seems.
Yeah, we never fare well in that area.
No, I would.
We need to work on
encourage you to look closely at it.
Yeah,
That's
Mark
just totally
is
different.
anyway, it just all happened this morning, and it just makes me just want to pause until we figure this problem out, and wish we hadn't spent the money someplace else.
It makes me want to do more than pause. But Mark, you came off. You got something?
Well, I just think pausing on that is the smart way to go at this point. Let's sit back, get this pump station together and figure it out, and then we can look moving forward. Yeah, don't spend that money if we're not really sure what we're going to do or how it's going to be handled yet.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable where our costs, what our final costs are going to be on that lift station, and that's much more pressing than this Intertie is.
Not the same consultant, is it?
No,
Good.
no. We're okay. So that's that one. My other one is, and this is something that John reminds me of and asks me, when are we going to pave our streets? About once a week. And I assured John this morning that we were going to, it's a priority. It's going to happen this summer. Well, something tragic happened over the weekend. Is somebody key in our engineering department's spouse was in a very serious automobile accident, and she's in intensive care. And we hope she pulls through. And if she does, she's looking at months of rehab. And I'm looking at, if this employee is going to be out more than a couple of weeks, that we should probably hire a consultant to manage our residential paving project, because you guys authorized more than $1 million in this budget to get the paving done, and I want to deliver on that. And if I'm missing some key staff, we may not be able to deliver on that. So more to come. And if I just want to plant that seed that if I bring a consultant contract forward with that you know why I'm doing it.
Understood. Thanks, Rob.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So that's all I've got.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, we'll see you all back online in 30 minutes.
And once again, I'm sorry for my internet. So thanks. And I guess we will adjourn the committee meeting.
Okay, see you guys.